All right, so thank you again for that beautiful welcome. And thank you all for being here this evening. My name is Sterling. I'm the campaign manager at Portland Harbor Community Coalition. Um, and thank you to everyone who's helped make this event possible, helpers of all ages, and for the candidates who are taking time out of their busy schedules today to be present for this environmental justice candidate forum. We'd also like to thank the University of Portland for this space, sponsors and coordinating organizations for all of their hard work. This event was especially made possible through our collaboration with Liz, social work and environmental justice professor here at the University of Portland. There's Liz. Sam Robinson, class TA and PHCC intern, and the 11 students enrolled in the course as well who helped with event logistics, communications, marketing, and strategy. Feel free to raise your hands.
Just wanted to say my name is Cassie Cohen. I'm the director of Portland Harbor Community Coalition. So we're a team of 2, but we have an amazing group with us that supported this event.
And we also wanted to thank our steering committee, especially Cerise Bach from 350 PDX and Jay from Unite Oregon, and the co-sponsors for this event from Wonderwood Springs, Columbia Riverkeeper, Sierra Club, the Urban League of Portland, NAIA Family Center, and the Coalition of Communities of Color. And now I'd like to introduce our amazing moderators we have here, Candace and Deshawn.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sterling. Itukti Wigwa Kanawishan, Naika Shawash Kliu Timix, Naika Bashtampich Kliu, Candace Jimenez. Good evening, everyone. My name is Candace Jimenez. I'm a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, live here in Northeast Portland, have come to school here and ended up staying, went to Concordia University and OHSU, and work in public health serving the Northwest Tribes. So really grateful to be here this evening.
Thank you for having me. My name is Deshawn Berry. I'm the founder and president of an organization called Get Hooked. I also grew up in Northeast Portland on 26 and going. I went to Madison High School. My organization primarily focuses on getting kids, youth of color outdoors. Fishing is my conduit. I've been a fisherman for over 30 plus years, and we've partnered with Portland Harbor Coalition on several different events surrounding the Superfund. So I'm really excited to be here.
So we invited all United States Congressional District 3 candidates to participate in this candidate forum.
And we're grateful for the candidates who have dedicated their time for us today.
So before we move on, we just wanted to give a minute each to each of you to provide a brief introduction before we get started.
Go. Hi, everybody in the crowd, and hi, everybody online. Hope everybody's having a good day. My name is Michael Jonas. I am a community business law attorney. I have for the past 7 years owned and operated a law firm called Rational Unicorn Legal Services. That is the name. We do community business law for everyone in the community. So I have helped businesses grow, survive, thrive, restructure, pivot, the most overused word. And during the pandemic, I was the guy who got the calls. I was working 60 to 70 hours a week, and restaurants would call me and say, we have to shut down our business in 3 days. What do we do? Or we have to cancel all of our contracts, or we're a mutual aid organization. We're out on the street giving folks food. How do we do this legally? So I was the person involved with that. I also have, in addition to being a lawyer, I have an executive MBA. So I've been a small business owner, and I've helped businesses and nonprofits of every type. Why I tell you that, I think I'm out of time, but I want you to know that I care deeply about economic development, and I think that that and climate justice can go hand in hand. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Well, I want to start out by saying thank you for the university and thank you for everyone else for having us here at this forum to talk about our issues and talk about why we're running. My name is Ricardo Barajas. I also go by Ricky. I'm a political activist. I've been passionately involved in politics since 2000 after the Bush and Gore Supreme Court decisions. So I've been very heavily passionate about politics and making a change in my community. I'm here just to obviously discuss my issues and what I'm running for. I believe in it's time for new generations, for leaders to step up and provide new ideas. And yeah, I'm excited to be here, be part of this great forum, hear other ideas, to see what we can do for the community in the district of the third district of Congress. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I am Rachel Lydia Rand. I have prepared answers for you this evening. I was given these questions yesterday. My platform is always focused on climate change. I ran for this office in 2018 and 2020 with my 40/40 plan, which suggests that people work from home in order to make a carbon savings. That theory was tested worldwide in April 2020 and did result in substantial carbon savings. I got into the climate change fight from riding my bicycle for transportation through the West Hills of Portland in 1991 and 1992. Like Representative Earl Blumenauer, I believe in the power of bicycles. Oil is a fuel. Oil is more than a fuel. It is a non-renewable substance that we use to pave our roads and shingle our houses. I'm campaigning in this election on the idea that we must significantly decrease our population this century in order to prepare for the upcoming world without oil.
My name is Nolan Bilinga, and I am 26 years old. I'm a student. I'm getting my master's degree at Portland State University, and I'm also kind of doing dual enrollment here at UP too. So I got a bunch of classmates, I guess, right, that helped put this on. I don't know any of them, but they have inspired me because there's a portion of me that's a little bit demoralized. I think that Americans are a little demoralized, and big money is dominating politics, as we can see that there's candidates that aren't here that have big money supporting them. And I applaud everyone here that's decided to show up and be part of this. I believe in, thank you. There's three things, that I think I really believe in. That's uniting Americans, because right now there's too much hate and division. I believe in the power of faith, that faith can move mountains, and that even someone as young as me and these students putting this stuff on, that we can do amazing things. And, I believe in all these candidates that are on this stage.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gary Dye. I am the Republican candidate for this office. I am I'm a new Republican. I switched over from the Libertarian Party a couple of years ago. I was with them for like 25 years. I ran for U.S. Senate in 2020. 2 years ago, I ran for Metro General Counsel. That was an interesting campaign. If anybody saw that. Yeah, I was born and raised. I was born down the street at Manual Hospital and went to David Douglas High School, outer Southeast Portland. My mother was born in Soviet Union, and she spent time in the Gulag and spent time in a Nazi concentration camp before she came here. My dad was 10th of 10 kids in Dust Bowl, Oklahoma during the Depression. Quite an experience. Anyway, I'm here to solve all of your problems.
Thank you, candidates. And this week, candidates Dr. Maxine Dexter, Eddie Morales, and Shashila Japal informed us they had hoped to participate today, but weren't able to do so. I think we did have a representative from Dr. Maxine Dexter's campaign, Nathan.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Nathan Clark, and I'm Dr. Maxine Dexter's campaign manager. Maxine wanted me to express her sincere apologies for not being here today. In addition to being a candidate, she's currently still a state representative and had a long-term commitment tonight in her district that she needed to attend. Thank you all for having and providing this forum. I just want to say just a couple words about Dr. Maxine Dexter. As a pulmonologist and critical care physician, Maxine has spent over 2 decades listening to patients, looking at the science, and finding solutions to improve people's lives. She witnesses the direct impact of climate change and poor air quality on people's health every day. Caring for people and their health is her life's work, and finding solutions to problems is what she does. Climate change is the most compelling existential threat to our planet and must be urgently addressed. Maxine believes we must be sure to follow science and make data-driven policy changes, as we are already experiencing the impacts now and will for generations to come. As a physician and scientist, she knows how to dig into the data and make policy with the input of experts and impacted communities. She's done this in the legislature, and she will continue to do this in Congress. She knows to seek advice from the work of experts. In this instance, our tribes, climate scientists, ecologists, physicists, biologists, and chemists, and work alongside impacted communities and groups such as the League of Conservation Voters and National Resource Defense Fund to provide more insight into the policymaking and politics of climate policy. Nothing about you without you is her policy, so this means she is diligent and dedicated in involving tribal leaders, unions, agricultural leaders, business leaders, and the community when developing climate-focused policy. Maxine appreciates you all being here this evening and engaging with candidates running for the seat. You can learn more about her campaign, and her environmental policies at maxineforegan.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathan. So before we get started with the questions that were provided to each of you, we also just wanted to share our gratitude to Representative Tana Sanchez, who's here with us this evening from House District 43. Thank you so much. So we'll go into the first question here, and we'll start with Michael. The first question is, what motivates you to run for the federal 3rd congressional district seat?
Well, when people ask me what issues I care about, I say, how much time do you have? We have a crisis on our hands and many crises. We keep pushing things down the line, kicking the can down the road. I'm tired of that. I'm fed up. I want to solve problems. I want to look at systems and look at things that don't work. My slogan is love, science, plans, and action. And the reason why is because thoughts and prayers are great and they're meaningful, but we are not cutting it. And we need to actually use experts at the table who are involved in the very things that we're trying to solve. This disconnect between born and bred politicians and policy bureaucrats and what is actually needed in our communities, it must stop. It's not getting us anywhere. So I'm running because I'm tired of what I call surface level progressivism. I want to see real change. I want to get in the structure, and I want to talk to big ag, big oil, big pharma, and hold them accountable and make sure that when we have moral imperatives that are tethered to corporate interest, that we can untangle those, because if we don't do that, we have nothing, not just our environment, our democracy is now at stake.
Thank you so much, Michael and Ricardo.
Yeah. Thank you. I think when we're all running for here, we have a mission, we're passionate about something. I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about making real change in my district and my country. I want to run as being a proactive member of Congress. I think so many times we're reactive to too many issues, too many incidents, and I'm just also kind of fed up that we have to wait till something happens until we pass something. I'm tired of bailing out big corporations, big banks. I want to build middle-class Americans. We need the relief, but we have so many people both on the left and right side who are being funded, and they don't care about the American people. Congress right now currently has a approval rating of 23%, the lowest has ever been. We need to elect new leaders, new young leaders all across the country to really promote and do the right thing for all Americans. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we need to work together to make and solve solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. Rachel?
Yes, climate change has always been my platform. From riding a bike, for transportation in a sea of cars in this country, it's very disorienting. We're making a lot of large vehicles, and this is not sustainable. And in my mind, a substance is going in our tanks and it's going up in the air. It's coming from the ground. It's going up in the air. Why did we do this? Maybe it was our maybe it's our purpose as humans to move this substance up into the atmosphere like that. I don't know. I don't get overly paranoid about that, but I do see the end coming, and we can talk about making our lives better and all that, and we've done that with oil. But I think we're going to be reversing the way technology goes here in the next 50 years.
Thank you, Rachel. Nolan?
I'll tell you what is, to be honest with why I'm running, I don't know every single thing that's out there. But what I see from politics today is a bunch of politicians that claim that they know everything that's out there, and they're not willing to look at science, not willing to look at experts, not willing to, coordinate and figure out how to bring Americans together as well. I know a lot of good Republicans. I know a lot of good Democrats, libertarians, people all across the board. And what I want to present, knowing that I don't know everything, is that I can be a light in the darkness. And I think that's what we need from everybody that's running for office, is people that say, regardless of the political climate, and there's things that we got to get done, like climate change and whatnot, that I completely agree with. But we have to unite Americans and decide that we're going to be a moral authority to the world once again, because I don't think that the world sees us as that, how we stand right now.
Thank you, Nolan. Gary?
Yes, the reason I'm running for office is basically because of my two kids. Owen is going to graduate from high school in a month, and my daughter is 2 years behind him. I'm basically retired, but I see a fiscal calamity coming in our country because of our national debt and the fact that we've tripled our money supply in the last 15 years. And that is going to head into an absolute calamity if something isn't done quickly. I mean, I can't believe what I'm seeing right now out of Congress and the Senate, where they just kind of matter of factly, oh yeah, well, deficit's now $2 trillion a year and climbing. And it's just accepted. This is going to bite us hard. It's going to break the dollar. And when you have hyperinflation and a dollar that's worthless, a government isn't going to be able to pay for anything. It's not going to be able to do anything about climate change or helping people out with money. Our government will be completely broken.
Thank you, Kenneth. I think we stayed within our time limits, and I think we have a couple more minutes. Did anyone have any further comments in relation to that question? No, perfect. We'll move on. This next question is for all the candidates. Again, you guys will have 2 minutes. We'll have about 15 minutes for this section. And so communities on the front line of climate change in District 3 are vulnerable to environmental impacts, and these issues vary across identities. Who do you consider frontline communities, and how do you plan to support and hold yourself accountable to their needs? And we can start from this way now if you like.
Well, the poor are always going to be affected first and foremost, and then the middle class, and then of course the elite people will not be affected at all. That's the way it works. If you kind of take a look at the Green New Deal, are they going to forbid space tourism? Are they going to forbid private jets? Are they going to forbid having multiple mansions? Are they going to forbid having first-class seating on airplanes? No. The whole agenda is to take things away from the middle class and the poor people. They want to reserve things for the rich and the elite people. And that's what's going on. And it's a really a terrible thing. As far as the climate is concerned, I believe that there are two solutions to climate change. The first is to adopt new forms of nuclear energy. New technology is much more safe and much more clean, a lot less nuclear waste to get rid of. And the other thing would be plug-in hybrid cars. I have a plug-in hybrid car, and 90% of my driving is electric, and only 10% of it is by gasoline. And if everybody had a plug-in hybrid car, you know, in the morning commute and the afternoon commute, it would be mostly all electric, and we wouldn't have any air pollution problems anymore. And then, you know, when you have to take long trips, you do it on gasoline. Very few and far between, but that's what you do. And you don't have these problems of trying to find an electric fueling station.
Thank you, Gary. Nolan?
I'll tell you what is, I think that there's some good stuff that Gary said about the poor. You know, the poor are disproportionately, you would say, affected by climate change. But I would also say that there is truth to that our remedy to climate change, the poor cannot afford. So we've got a problem there that we've got to figure out, because I can't go and buy a Tesla, right? You know, I can't go and buy an electric car just being a student and a young person like me. But there's a problem that we've got to solve where we have to be able to clean up the environment. We've got to be able to litigate and clean up areas that have been polluted. There's areas where, actually, interesting thing is, I know a lot of people won't like me saying this, but RFK Jr., right? He had a career in litigating an environmental law. That was his entire life, was litigating environmental law. That's what he did. So, like, he's kind of the perfect person for something like this. But this dude, what he would do is he would litigate against polluters and hold them accountable himself as an environmental lawyer. You know, there's part of me that says, let's say I don't go win an election like this. I want to go get a law degree and become an environmental lawyer. He's kind of inspired me, you know, so that's going to be my comment on that. But we have to bridge both sides and figure out a real solution. And that's going to take, you know, talking to scientists, economists, lawyers. It's going to take a lot more than I think we have on the table right now.
Thank you, Nolan. Appreciate that. Rachel?
I think that everyone in the world is on the front lines of climate change and the inevitable end of oil. I'll be very clear about this. Human activity causes climate change. It's us wanting to build a good life for ourselves by studying to get a good job to support our families. It's us moving up the social ladder and buying cars so that we can get to the other side of town every day to work a job in an office or restaurant. It's us buying air conditioners and vacations. In order to fight the true causes of climate change, human activity, we need to do less. It's very much like what we did during the pandemic. We stayed at home. The only mathematical solution that I see to this problem is for us to decrease our population. I'm suggesting that for the next 40 years, we have just one child for every 2 women. That would allow us to get world population down to 2 billion people by 2099. That's 3/4 of a century from now. We need to get started on this work now before our oil situation and environmental problems force us to reduce population in an uncivilized manner.
Thank you, Rachel. Ricardo?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I think for me, like I mentioned, my platform is just being proactive. We all know climate change is real, or the effects of it, we're already seeing it. What's gonna happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years, the coastal cities are gonna see the effects of it. For Florida, East Coast, New York, Boston, DC, New Orleans will see the first effect of rising waters. 2005, we saw the effects of Hurricane Katrina. 3 months after that hurricane, I went down there to see the effects of it firsthand. What I saw was just nothing but a horrific sight. What happened was in the Ninth Ward, where people of color and people who are poor suffered the worst. People were still living in those houses, and it was just a sad sight to see that our government took so long just to save those people. If they would have just had a better infrastructure with the levees and improved their infrastructure, those people wouldn't have lost their homes, and the Ninth Ward community wouldn't have been lost. So we need to do a lot, and we can do a lot here. I hope the money that the infrastructure, the bill that President Biden passed does help us now, but there's a lot that we can do. I do agree with some things my counterpartners have said. However, the Green New Deal is not about reducing space travel or the things Gary said. It's about limiting our contribution, what we're doing, reducing it, and overall with 10, 20 years going 100% clean energy. I'm for electric vehicles. I'm for hybrids. However, we don't have the capability at the moment to have charging stations. If we can get there 100% in the next 10 years or less, we can see going 100% electric with zero gas, zero emission, and that will help the environment overall. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Michael?
the first thing I'll say is that climate action, it's a systematic approach, right? So when we talk about climate action, we have to not just talk about the environment, we have to talk about the economy, we have to talk about transportation, we have to talk about housing and the urban growth boundary. We also have to talk about these communities, and that was part of the question. Is we have a really great opportunity here to lift up BIPOC communities. We have a great opportunity to look at multi-generational farmers and see if they can survive or rework their farm. We have an opportunity to teach youth about sustainable food ecosystems. So I see climate action in a multifaceted way. I also want to talk about how people see things differently. When we talk about native tribes, for example, the meaning of the fish or the ecosystem or the biodiversity, for one person, it might be a scientific thing. For another person, it is the history of their tribe. So I think having culturally and community focused solutions to climate action is extremely important, but it is an all systems and all hands on deck process.
Thank you, candidates.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question and we'll start with you, Michael. How do you plan to support local, national, and global green economies that provide employment opportunities for residents and work to eliminate inequitable working conditions, such as those faced by migrant seafarers that dock at the harbor and are unable to access basic services?
So the seafarers that dock at the harbor, they often don't have a visa or citizenship. My thought is that they should be treated as if they had any and all things. So they should have a right to get on land, whatever that means, and live life. They should be provided with transportation services, make sure that they have good housing, good food. We also should make sure that they have good communication channels. A lot of them are worried not just about violating an immigration policy, but they're worried about being fired or retaliation or hostility from their work environment. So developing proper communication between those systems is extremely important. I think we need to, and this is a larger thing of not just those folks, we need to stop treating people who help us in our everyday life and in our everyday economy with disgrace. We need to treat them with love and compassion. These are folks who are working day and night on things that we care about and things that are necessities for our society. And not only with our broken immigration system and our broken visa system and asylum system, but in how we are treating migrant workers, seafarers, any sort of worker. We are treating them like second-class citizens or second-class people or okay violating human rights. And I think that has to stop immediately.
Thank you. And Ricardo?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a twofold question, and I agree with much what Michael said about immigration. Unless we fix that, which Congress has no plan of doing it, if you look at what they're doing, this is going to just be a trickling effect over and over. So with that, we need people to are going to go into Congress, finally stop the immigration solution, or put a plan for citizenship, especially with the farm workers. As far as the other question is, my plan is to support members of Congress who are sponsoring a Green New Deal. As far as like, for example, AOC, she has a great idea, which I don't agree 100% on what she's putting out there, but she has a plan to put us forward. The alternative would mean lack of food, water we drink, homes, and industry. Climate change has been already affected our great state of Oregon with wildfires causing billions in damage, extreme heat, and warming of rivers. We need to achieve results together, which will be a clean air, stronger economy, healthier and resilient Oregon for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Yes, this question is about supporting green economies. My answer to this is our society's concept of a growing economy and full employment is an enemy of meaningful climate change action. I think it is unreasonable to think that a lithium-based economy is going to sustain our civilization as we know it. I think that population decline can be a driver into a new economy that leaves the old debt-based, fossil fuel-based economy behind for good. The primary purpose of our economy is to make and distribute food, clothing, and shelter to people. Beyond those basic needs, employment opportunities are a drag on our lives and actually threaten our future civilization by polluting our environment. While we are over here dealing with the social issues of obesity, homelessness, and drug addiction, China and the world's factory economies are flooding the world markets with clothing, computer products, and other essential hardware items. They have massive pollution over there, and I'm sure they are getting burned out with all the work they are doing. I predict that they are going to massively cut production in the near future as a solution to their problems. I strongly urge Americans to be grateful for all the products that they have and take care of them. We're living in a high-tech future world based on oil, and I believe we are at a turning point in history where we are going to reverse course. The upside here, and there is an upside, is that our main job is simply to not work, not have as many children, and enjoy all the technology and knowledge we have. I use a lot of dire language about this because it is important. But the reality is that we are headed into a prolonged world music and sports celebration that will last for decades. This is going to be a wonderful time in our history. Please consider voting for me and having less children. Let's count our blessings.
Thank you. Nolan?
Thank you. I think with climate change and finding, trying to create a green economy, I see a lot of people that want to go the route of, punishing businesses with, carbon tax and things like that. And I know that there's a lot of folks that are in power across the country that are not going to be okay with that. That's why we had, a walkout in Oregon, and a lot of Republicans didn't really allow it to happen. I mean, you could try it over and over and over again and see if it happens eventually. But what we've got to do is create incentive for businesses and make it so that they want to actually be part of climate policy and in creating a green economy, right? And part of the issue that we have right now is that there's so much money that's in politics that I don't think our politicians will ever actually do it. I think it's a thing where the people that go in use it as an avenue of, hey, vote for me, even though this isn't really what I'm passionate about or really what I care about. And they get a bunch of money from these organizations. What happens? They go into office and then they kind of get cold and they decide, well, I can get away with just talking about it, but I don't really have to vote for it. If you saw in the Senate with the Green New Deal, right, is Democrats don't support it in the Senate. The Republicans vote no, the Democrats vote present. So, I mean, the reality is that the people that we keep electing into office are never actually going to do anything about it, in my opinion. We've got to find a way to come up with an alternative solution so that it's not married to anti-Republican. We have to be able to bridge the gap and find a way to create incentive so that businesses want to be a part of it. And then we can actually unite Americans around that at the same time.
Thank you. And Gary?
As a libertarian, I don't really believe that government should get too involved with the economy. However, if they are, I would have government, for one thing, get out of the way of they need to support nuclear energy and get that going, get things licensed, and also I would say, and the subsidies of electric vehicles and push those towards subsidies of plug-in hybrid vehicles. But getting back to government, I work for Northwest Natural, probably the biggest fossil fuel company in the state. And what really struck me was that there was a dirty deal made with the Energy Trust Oregon, such that Northwest Natural would join that organization along with PGE and the other electric companies. And the dirty deal was this. PGE and the electric companies are forbidden to extol the virtues of heat pumps. And heat pumps are the perfect or the best device to heat your home. When I was working for Northwest Natural, I got a 20% subsidy of my gas bill, right? And I built this fairly large home on Mount Scott, which I currently live in. And I was really worried about paying for my heating bill. But I found out that, even after my 20% subsidy from Northwest Natural, it would be far, far cheaper to heat my house with a heat pump. So I bought a heat pump. And the thing is, again, PGE is forbidden to extol the virtues of heat pumps because Northwest Natural doesn't want that. That would be the end of Northwest Natural if people switch to heat pumps here. But the state government is forbidding that. It's a dirty deal.
Thank you, candidates. And just a quick reminder, we do have interpreters. So if you guys could just take your time, allow them to communicate in a way that they are able to also. Moving forward now, so this will go to Michael. I'll start this way again. The Portland Harbor is one of many Superfund sites in the country that has yet to be cleaned up. Most of the Superfund sites have general contractors bring in crews from out of state with little incentive to build wealth and economic justice for Superfund affected communities. How can you ensure that diverse regional contractors and workforce made up of people of color, formerly and currently unhoused people, women and youth, etc., are provided safe, quality jobs, and future career pathways to work on related projects?
Sure. First of all, I'll tell you that I actually, at my current job, I work with minority contractors of every type, women, everybody in a diverse sense. And I think one of the ways you do this is you do this through collaborations, you do this through community partnerships, you also do this through community benefit agreements where you have all the stakeholders come together immediately, not at the end, and you say, okay, kind of like this event, which is great and brought together by various organizations. You have everybody at the table who's involved economically, culturally, scientifically, on and on. And I think from a federal government perspective, not just with this, but other things, we have to start making federal funding contingent on things. And so I think for the Superfund components, I would look into, is there funding that's tied to specific community benefit agreements that have to happen, right? So are there Native people at the table, or are we prescribing to them what we think should happen? So I think that's how I would do it. And then also treating climate justice as an opportunity for shared economic prosperity, to give the means of local communities to not only have vocational programs, workforce training, to get good, well-paying green jobs into that community. So basically we have a whole system where we have community colleges, which should be free, by the way. We have community college with vocational programs. We have educational systems at the local level. So when you're in school, you actually learn about not just climate change, but you learn about all the opportunities for a career in that field. So we need to look at the whole entire education system and the whole entire economy system while we're doing climate justice work. And I know I said this earlier, I said there's a systems approach to this. If we don't look at how these pieces are interconnected economically and culturally, we're going to fall flat and we're going to continue to be tone deaf.
Thank you, Michael. Ricardo?
Thank you. I think one thing Nikki Haley said during her run and then one of her debates, we need an accountant, not in the White House, but in Oregon. Any federal funding that comes our way, we need to make sure the funds stayed in Oregon for us, for Oregonians, not any of the states. We have to make perfect example was, the COVID-19 relief bill. There's a lot of money still allocated out there that's not being used. So we have to make sure that money has been allocated to our state, stays here. Regarding your question, like I mentioned, the money allocated to clean up Portland Harbor must stay in Oregon to grow and support our local communities and provide opportunities for people of color, the young, and provide a path to a growing workforce. Any remaining funds after the harbor cleanup will be used to provide housing, or should be used to provide housing, resources, quality healthcare, and a clear career path with our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. Rachel?
Yes. I have no authority here to, I have no power here to get people's attention. I hope to be a highly visible person in the national media as a trans woman, jazz musician, and software engineer in Congress. I've got a strong ego backed with a ton of research, life experiences, and political writing for a decade to talk politics with anyone in the world. I currently don't have the authority or respect to talk with the people who I'm interested in talking with. I spent January trying to arrange a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers to discuss the engineering and future of Bonneville Dam and our structures on the Columbia. I had several email interactions with them, and then I got the cold shoulder. I also tried to arrange a meeting with Rodney McMullen, the CEO of Kroger, to discuss my ideas about modifying the payment systems and other grocery logistics. He refused to respond to my email, but I posted my solutions on my website on the day I suggested the meeting for. The fact is that I need your vote to get into a position of power so that I can get these people's attention. With your vote in May, in the May 24 primary, I believe I will have the power to have rational conversations with these people. I've been preparing for decades to be intelligent enough to drive these conversations. All I really need now is your vote.
Thank you, Rachel. Nolan?
I do think, like Rachel said, that it's true that these people that are in power, it's very tough to get a hold of a lot of folks. I know our Congress people and representatives, they have organizations that were set up. See, I was an intern a while back for U.S. Senator Merkley, and there are routes of avenue to try to, get a hold of your Congress people and senators. But there is still a very big disconnection. So we have to do better with that. There's got to be more town halls or something along those lines. But, with environmental stuff, especially like with super funds, I think everybody, for the most part, agrees that we should go into these areas and clean them up and help provide more jobs for folks. And, it's a matter of having regulation around it too, so that we can have safe jobs and, make sure that people have good livelihoods. We provide good wages for them. It's just a matter of the whole. And if we can have more connection points, then we don't have areas where, like Flint, Michigan, for example, right? How long has Flint, Michigan had a water crisis? And we're still waiting there. We're still waiting on Flint, Michigan to have good water. There's a disconnect, and we've got to find a way to route the public, we the people, back to the government.
Thank you, Nolan. Gary?
When I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2020 as a libertarian, I had part of my platform reparations, if you can believe that. And you should have seen all the calls calling me a communist and a traitor and this, that, and the other thing. But I stuck with it. And the reason I stuck with it was that it's not a race-based reparations, but it would be a economic-based reparations. And what I wanted to do was that the last thing that the government would do before it became completely libertarian, was to have this big transfer of wealth, basically from rich people to poor people. And the basis for that was something like this. Like the Jews in Nazi Germany, they had their, Judaism was determined to be an illegal thing. Being a Jew was illegal. And so the government took, houses and businesses and wealth and everything away from Jews, right? And that was the law. That was something that government did. It's beautiful, right? Isn't that what, doesn't government do beautiful things? Well, after the Nazis lost the war, there has been a big effort to claw back that wealth and art and businesses away from the Nazis that grabbed all of that and put it back to the Jews, right? And the same thing is happening in our economy. We don't have a free market economy. It's not free. And Black people who got hurt really, really bad by slavery, and then after that, another 100 years or so of really bad discrimination, they found themselves in ghettos and on the lower economic rungs. And anyone who's on the lower economic scale, it's really hard to get out of that, right? For anybody. And they're still there. So, and then there's a lot of rich people who are taking advantage of these government things, the mixed economy, right? So that was the basis of the transfer of wealth. And that is in my voters pamphlet statement, by the way. The reparations and also universal basic income for another reason that we can get to that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. All right. So we'll be moving on to the next question. I just wanted to share to you with the candidates, we're actually going to move to 1 minute to be mindful of time. So the next question is, the critical energy infrastructure hub in the Portland Harbor stores 90% of the state's fossil fuels. When the Cascadia earthquake occurs, which could happen in our lifetimes, it's expected to cause a far greater national catastrophe than the BP oil spill. In what ways will you address disaster preparedness and prevention through federal level policies? And in what ways will these policies relate to the needs of vulnerable communities?
Oh, me? I'm sorry. So one thing I'll say is we have to figure out how to reconcile private with local, state, and federal governments. We have this issue where we don't always know where the thing that's dangerous lives. I was telling someone earlier, we also have trains that have go through communities in Portland that have explosives on them. And we have no predictability of what they are, and we have no predictability of when the train is coming or going. So first, I think searching for all of these things that are dangerous here and assessing what they are, who has power or control over them, and what can we do to make sure that they're safe is extremely important. In terms of disaster preparedness, I think we need to double down on culturally specific disaster preparedness. And that is not just multiple languages, that is meeting people where they're at and saying, this is what needs to happen, or this is what you can do if this happens. I don't think we're there. I don't think we're ready as a country for disasters. And you see it, we're not really a preventative nation, and we need to be immediately.
Thank you. Ricardo?
Thank you. If my memory serves me correct, I think the hub was built or created around the 1950s. That's it's a long time ago. If an earthquake were to hit today in the West Coast or the in our part, those hubs will cause billions of dollars in damage. Like you mentioned, 90%, which is 193 million gallons of liquid oil. What we need to do immediately is ask for funding to, again, reinforce the infrastructure, but also to ask the Department of Transportation and engineers to come out to our hubs, the oil facilities, and see what could be prevented now to prevent a future catastrophe. We've seen what's happening with different incidents in our past with ExxonMobil. We've seen what's happening in the Gulf Coast of Mexico. So we need to be prepared in order to prevent a catastrophe damage that would affect not just the river, but overall the community of Portland. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yes, this question talks about the Cascadia earthquake. We actually live in kind of a dangerous place here with Mount Hood. Here, if if Mount Hood explodes, if we have these earthquakes, our dam here is in danger. Where we get all our electricity from, basically in the Portland area. Our water supply, we can only be so prepared for these things. How many backup systems can you make of this large scale? That's what I have to say. We live in a dangerous place here. How can we evacuate the city if we lose our water supply, our electricity supply? It's going to be tough.
Thank you.
And,
Nolan?
Just before we start again, just make sure you guys are being aware of the interpreters again. Just slow down a little bit for the interpreters. Musa and Mike's close.
I got my mic right here. It's it's a hard question because you think about how far do you want to delve into trying to take away from people's individual liberties, but you've got to have some kind of system. So it's a question for the experts, and me being a 26-year-old college student, I don't have every single question there. But I'll tell you what is, I know that we have amazing people that serve in military and whatnot that are able to show up in almost no time's notice for a humanitarian crisis. And someone told me the other day that when it comes to folks, for example, there's a lot of folks that want socialism and things, and the military is kind of a great representation of how that might work, other than weapons and war and stuff like that. So if we can look at their system of how they maneuver and how they can get into a situation and solve that problem, I think that's the direction that we go.
Thank you. Gary?
Let me tell you a personal story. I'm kind of a survivalist type of a guy. And so I wanted to put some solar panels on my house for survivalist type of reasons, not really necessarily environmental reasons. And so what happened is, like 15 years ago, the state of Oregon was subsidizing solar panels just like the federal government, but the state of Oregon didn't want to spend that kind of money. So they came up with this new program called the feed-in tariff. And what that was that instead of me getting a bunch of cash to pay for the solar panels, I had the rate for my electricity generation be 4 times the retail rate. I'm getting 41.2 cents per kilowatt hour for every electron that I generate off my solar panels. Now, the problem with that is that you guys are paying me that. It's you. Your rates have gone up to subsidize me and me getting that cash. That's what the state wanted to do. And that was kind of wrong. That's me, I think. The thing is, so I had that set up. I've got that going. I've been on that for 12 years now, getting all kinds of crazy money, and it's non-taxable for some unknown reason. They started this other program with the earthquake. And I said, hey, wait a second here. I want to have batteries on the side of my house such that, if there is this earthquake, my neighbors can come up and charge their phones and charge whatever, this, that, and the other thing. I'd be okay because I've got the batteries and the solar panels. But they didn't allow that because PGE wants to stop this program where they're collecting money from you and giving it to me. So I haven't been able to do that.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we
And
do got to
that's
move it on.
Kind of like
So,
ridiculous.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Thank you. This is going to be our final. We have actually just 2 more questions. We'll try to get through these as quick as possible. But recently, small modular nuclear reactors have been touted as a climate solution. Here in Oregon, a company called New Scale Power has been a benefactor of more than $1 billion of federal money. However, as of now, they have been unable to begin projects due to supposedly unforeseen cost increases. What is your stance on nuclear power, and will you work to slow the stop of federal subsidies of nuclear power research and development in Congress? And Michael, you can go ahead and start.
So first of all, I'll tell you, I am against funding for nuclear power, especially now. In Oregon, we had a nuclear power plant called Trojan, which actually didn't do very well. And it had all sorts of leaks, all sorts of problems. Essentially, it had to be closed, and it took 13 years to decommission it. The thing is nuclear plants also, they cost $6 to $13 billion and they take 6 to 8 years. We need solutions now. So we need to actually double down on the environmentally clean energy that we have. So that would be wind and solar and geothermal and some, I say some, hydropower, if the hydropower does not destroy or disrupt the biodiversity of the ecosystem, such as salmon and other plants and animals. So I think we have a beautiful abundance of clean energy here that the federal government should be investing in, not in nuclear power.
Thank you, Michael. Ricardo?
Thank you. My first thing I want to mention is, if they're not using the money, where is it going to? So I would like the money to stay in Oregon for other resources or go back to the federal government. That's one thing I want to put out there. Second, do I support nuclear energy? Yes and no. I don't support building new nuclear energy, so reactors, because as Michael said it well, it takes 5 to 8 years and costs billions of dollars. However, until we fully transition to 100% clean energy, we can use what we have at the moment safely. The biggest risk of nuclear reactors is obviously the risk of a potential meltdown. But if we have good infrastructure, good solid safeguards to use until we become 100% renewable, we should implement them until we have a chance to phase them out in the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. Rachel?
Yes, in 2017, in preparation for my 2018 run for U.S. Representative, I started off by writing a paper on energy. I did some research on solar panels and crunched some numbers. It seemed like an awful lot of solar panels to get us to where we needed to be. I actually support nuclear power. There is no free lunch. I seriously doubt that intermittent power sources like wind and solar are going to be able to sustain the lifestyles that we are accustomed to. We use a lot of energy driving around town. I had to take the bus here today to get here with my roommate. I might have ridden my bicycle. I've been riding my bicycle from Beaverton to Fairview lately. It takes a long time to do that. It's a 5-hour bike ride. To electrify all our transportation is going to require a lot of power. I think we should consider where that power is coming from.
Thank you, Rachel. Nolan?
No, it is true that total clean energy, green energy is the ideal, but it does take a lot of work and energy to get there. So perhaps, nuclear energy can be sort of a transitionary tool from fossil fuels. It depends on, where you're looking at it. I think it's a question that's, it really depends on the economic numbers. And off the top of my head, I'm not going to have the economic numbers. I'd have to have a team of people that could look at it and see exactly what the parameters, how we can go from point A to Z.
Thank you, Nola. Gary?
I started out as a chemical engineer in the big oil industry, in the oil refining industry for like 15 years. And I switched over to natural gas and was an employee for Northwest Natural Gas for 12 years. I know something about energy. And what I also know about is people like money. They really like money. They want to get rich. And that's what's going on these days. You know, these solar and wind companies and these other kinds of alternative energy companies, you know, they're going to Congress in the back alleys of Congress and they're getting these bills such they get all kinds of subsidies and massive amounts of money that make them very, very rich. That's what they want. But the solution is, of course, nuclear energy. Trojan is 60-year-old technology. We're doing a lot better now. And, you know, I wish Elon Musk would step in and take over the nuclear energy. You know, I think that would solve our problems.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our last prepared question that you all had received. And a reminder of 1 minute and to be mindful of the interpretation that's happening as well. The concept of a just transition for workers and frontline communities as we move away from fossil fuels to renewable energy has gained significant momentum in recent years. What does this term just transition mean to you? We'll start with Michael.
Yeah, interesting answers tonight. So just transition is basically looking at climate action in a way that also looks at socioeconomic development. We have for too long made changes and hurt marginalized communities. I mean, even here with the Rose Quarter, with Albina, with the building of Emmanuel where you were born, we consistently make changes to infrastructure without being culturally specific. We also hire people, steal from China, workers from other states. We need to have these changes be community oriented, culturally specific. They need to be well-paying jobs, and they need to lift communities that are actually there and actually involved. And so I think it's possible. I don't think they're mutually exclusive or dichotomous. I think you can have responsible climate action while also thinking about historic wrongs and making things as right as possible for moving forward.
Thank you.
Very good.
Ricardo.
It is a great question. I think to me, it means the managing of decarbonization and the end of poverty and migration. All this is connected in a way where climate change affects certain parts of the world that people are migrating because floods, droughts. So if we can address those issues, you're going to see a reduce of poverty, a reduce of massive migration, and it'll be a cleaner earth for all of us. We need to start planning for the next 50 years. What we're doing now, it is helping, but it's not helping enough for our next generation of leaders, our children. So we need to be partnering up with our communities and state and local and universities to see what is efficient and what can we do together to promote promote cleaner energies and promote growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yes, I think that as a society, we should concentrate on reducing demand for energy instead of increasing supply or changing our supply for it. I'm a musician, and when the power goes out, I'm pretty happy playing my grand piano and drums. You know, the rat race that produces all these devices, and every device that we create needs a power source. You know, I think we can do better as a society and live better artistic lives if we can learn to live with less power.
Thank you. Nolan?
I think that's true. You know, it takes more than the policy. It takes a community of folks and it takes a culture that's going to decide that we're going to use less energy, that we're going to recycle, that we're going to do things in a particular way. And, you know, we try to in areas like this, but a lot of people, you know, they get lazy with it. So when it comes to transitioning, we have to have a full on set, you know, like people have to be involved. We've also got to have people involved internationally. It cannot just be the US, you know, I hate to say it. And we got to figure out a way to negotiate with the big other world powers like China and Russia and get them on board with environmental policy. Because if we destroy our economy and they're just flying smooth colors, then we're screwed. You know, they're coming up with a brick, and things will not go so hot if we just go head first in that direction without building a big international scale plan.
Thank you. Gary.
Yeah, I have to add to that the fact that China and India, who are the world's largest users of energy now, they're not doing anything to decrease their carbon emittance. We cannot continue to destroy our own economy for these goals. Our economy is already been destroyed by transferring most of our industry over to China and other cheap labor countries. We just can't afford to do this anymore. So I really believe in the free market, and engineers and smart people are the ones that are going to get us out of any kind of mess we have with global warming and climate change.
Thank you so much. Before we transition on, the students are actually going to go through the audience if there's any questions that folks may have written down, or there's a QR code that you may see where you can submit questions online. So these questions will be collected, and the students will be choosing a couple of those to have us bring in front of the candidates here. And I believe the student team is going to come up and do a few more raffle items.
So we did have a couple of questions that came in from the audience, and these can be posted to anybody who wants to take them. The Inflation Reduction Act is one of the best pieces of climate legislation the U.S. has passed in recent decades. What specific policies within the act do you support, oppose, and would work to expand on any of these policies during your time in Congress? And anybody can answer. I'm going to start pointing if no one answers.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, no problem.
Sorry.
The Inflation Reduction Act is one of the best pieces of climate legislation the U.S. has passed in recent decades. What specific policies within the act do you support or either oppose? And would you work to expand on any of these policies during your time in Congress?
Yes. You see the result of the Inflation Act did help throughout 2022. We were to expand that, it would lower inflation and lower interest rate. I believe what President Biden is trying to attempt is just to minimize the effect, and also for example, as far as gas prices, put a cap on these companies who are making billions of dollars in earnings. So we can include all that together, expand any legislation he passed. The trickle down effect will help Americans, but we just have to make sure that we can add more to the bill to see what we can do in the next 1 to 2 years. Because right now, as the inflation has come down but dipped back up, we have to make sure we ask analysts and experts to see what can we do together with the feds and lowering the cost of goods and especially food.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed, it was the infrastructure bill that didn't get passed. And so by running it through as a budgetary measure and calling it that, of course, it was passed. And so one really great thing is it's a massive infrastructure bill. We haven't had that in a really long time. The issues that we have, though, is it doesn't incorporate a lot of the Green New Deal policies, which I actually support and took the pledge that I support the Green New Deal bills. And so what it doesn't include is all these things that we're talking about, like workforce training and community-centered agriculture and, on and on and on. And so if we're going to actually have environmental change, we need to not just think about the infrastructure, which is important, of course, building more electric vehicle charging stations and things like that. But we need to be thinking about all the other components, educational, food ecosystems, job training. And that's what it has a slight little bit of that, but is missing a great number of what we're calling Green New Deal bills.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to take a couple minutes
Sure,
of
I'll
that? We
chime
can
in on this.
And then me.
No problem.
My thing is real short on this. Anything that we do to stimulate the economy is going to cause greater climate change emissions. It's going to cause us to create more stuff and be more prosperous. So I think we're pretty prosperous as we are now. I'm sure you've learned from what I've said this evening. I envision a future economy that's quite different than what we have now.
Thank you, Rachel. Gary?
I disagree. The Inflation Reduction Act is an absolute disaster. It's something we just don't need in this time of in huge national debt and all the money printing. It is going to increase inflation, and you're seeing that right now. Inflation is coming back, you know.
Can I comment?
Bad.
Sure.
I don't know if that was allowed in this forum, but there are a lot of people who talk about things like infrastructure bills as being too much money, and then there are people who stand right up next to that bridge that was built or that thing that got that money, and so there's a disconnect. The other thing is when you build infrastructure, the infrastructure doesn't know whether your child's a Republican or Democrat or Libertarian. You need bridges to not collapse. You need roads to be paved, and so they don't speak party. So infrastructure should be a given, and the same people who are worried about spending on that, they have no problem with, giant tax cuts for the 1% or an endless military budget. So if we don't actually spend money on the things that we need and the things that give us longevity and the things that provide health and safety for our children, who are we as a nation?
Thank you, guys. We'll move on to our next question.
So Michael, you kind of touched on this in your recent response, thinking about future generations. So the question is, how will you support creating pathways for young people to enter politics? And floor is open. Nolan?
I'll answer the question, because I'm a young person myself.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what is, I think that what they've done to set up this forum is one of the best things that you can do. Me running as a 26-year-old for Congress, is not an easy task by any means of the imagination. And along the way, I'll tell you what, and I hate to say this too, is that there's a lot of stuff in the Democratic infrastructure that has created roadblocks for me. They haven't really been that all welcoming to me as a candidate, as a young person. So, and I know there's been issues for some of the other candidates getting in forums and doing stuff as well. I think the part of that comes with money, but we've got to be true to our values 100%. And you've got to inspire young people by making them believe that they themselves can make the change happen. It doesn't mean that every young person has to be the catalyst on the ballot to go, make change, but you have to make them believe that they can. And it just spawns from ton of things.
Thank you.
And I guess that if you believe in young people being in politics, you're going to be against having an 86-year-old as president of the United States.
We got a lot of old candidates, I'll tell you that. I'd like some younger candidates, and I'm sure everybody else would too.
I piggyback off Nolan. My first campaign when I was 30, so you're younger than me. So congrats, Nolan, for running at 26. My hat's off to you. I think for me, one, I believe in term limits. I will never run after 4 terms. After my 4 terms, I will support someone in this stage, someone new in my community who wants to run, not an insider, not someone part of the establishment, not a family member. Enough of that. So I'm for term limits. I will run 4 terms, retired. If I were to come to the town forum, see any candidates, I will support them. The Democrat Party has to do much more to attract young, new, diverse talent into our future. What it could be anyone, but you need new talent to power us into the next 2 generations with new presidential candidates. Lastly, the Democrat Party needs to fund, at least promote new ideas and promote a startup fund for us. It's not easy to run, as Nolan knows, to raise money because no one knows our names. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing? I want to say, I think campaign finance reform is a big thing too, and just changing the way the primaries are run in this country, especially for the presidential elections. I'll tell you what, is being a young person in 2016, I was very disappointed when all of the super delegates went to one particular candidate when I wanted to see the other candidate win. They would win the state. And, you know, I'll just say Bernie Sanders won the first state in the primary in 2016, and he ended up losing the state because all the super delegates went to the other candidate. And I think if that's what's happening, I'll tell you what, I'm pretty demoralized voting in a Democratic primary. So, and that's not to just hardcore attack the Democratic Party, but like that's just a thing where we've got to shift it. We've got to shift it and make it so where people feel confident in who they're voting for.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you.
So let me be real with you. The three candidates who are not here, I know that they had prior commitments. They're all lovely people, but the three of them are coming off of an elected role, right? So what happens is someone who's coming off of an elected role, they have political systems and political establishments, and they have political dollars. Not that that's a bad thing. If you have political experience, or if you have experience, it could be great. But the House of Representatives, the position we're all running for, was not meant to be about born and bred politicians. It was meant to be about ordinary people. So I am a community business attorney who cashed out my retirement and is $400,000 in student loan debt. I talked to my husband about that. We're just fighting to survive, right? And to pay our bills. And what happens is I'm a community business attorney with an MBA, and I've been told that I'm not viable to run for Congress. And so if I'm not viable, what about a single mother? What about a nurse? What about a teacher? What happens is we're in this circular of people who want a grassroots candidate. They then see candidates who have massive endorsements as viable, and they see candidates who have the ability to raise a fortune as viable. But let me tell you, that's not what viability is. Viability is passion. Viability is work ethic. Viability is business creation. It's being a community collaborator, organizer, like some of the folks on the stage tonight. So don't be fooled. If you want politics to change, you look at people and you ask, are you actually going to do a good job? And are you going to do something different? Or are you going to do what we call surface level progressivism?
That leads us right into our next question, and that's a great segue. And as many of us know, money has pretty much turned politics into a cesspool, and so Congress seems to be, to many outsiders, a cesspool of corruption, and it's constantly undermining the public interest in favor of wealthy patrons. How will you avoid falling prey to this bipartisan syndrome? And you guys have all pretty much touched on it because you said money is important to be in Congress, but how do you stay away from it? Because I can tell you that pretty much all of us have probably voted for someone who said they were going to do something and did something totally different when they got into Congress. And so how do you stick to your moral base, your grassroots approach that you're giving to us all right now? How do you not take the money when it's there in front of you?
I'll go. You know, I think that it comes down to that campaign finance report reform, and I know this is particularly like something that's personal. But what happens, and I've seen this like firsthand, is you've got organizations that are around these big candidates, and they're swaying them to vote in a particular way, whether they want to vote that way or not. They know that's where the money is coming from, and some of it might be good policy, but the issue comes with how much money they're getting from people, and that they're being almost pseudo forced, you know, to vote in that direction. I've been kind of saying to folks, you know, under the radar that they're like paid actors, right? Is you got a lot of people that don't really believe what they're voting for in Congress. And because these organizations have said, hey, we'll give you this money if you kind of read this script that we've given you to vote in this particular way. And so I think if we remove the money, it allows people to be a little more genuine, to stick to the things that they believe in, to talk amongst, so we can have a discussion between like Democrat and Republican. You know, like we just heard that he supports what is it, like reparations and whatnot. So it's a big issue, but it's the finance reform is a big thing.
Thank you, Nolan. Ricardo? Gary, whoever.
I'll go if you don't mind, Gary.
Go ahead.
Okay. Transparency and accountability. I think my core values are my core values. Someone asked me, would you go into Congress voting down the line or bipartisanship? I want to go on there working across the aisle because that's what we need to work together to achieve results together, to go back to the way it used to be, where it used to be civility. However, there's core values issues that I will not vote against because it is important for my community and my constituents. And the same thing, if I say X and you see I do the opposite, vote me out. Simple as that. If I don't do one thing that I promised I would do, vote me out. Lastly, my campaign, we started doing door-to-door knocking last week, and someone said, wow, no one's come to my door in 20 years. We need more candidates to go out there and talk about their issues, what they're doing, what they didn't do, and listen to them. I should be there, you should be here. So I can listen from you and what do you need? Because there's a lot of representatives are doing Zoom meetings, which is great because that's our new 21st century. But I'd rather have a town hall forum when they're off session, listen to the issues, what I haven't done, and what I can do for the next term that I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Libertarians are pretty idealistic people, and I've always claimed that I can't be bought. You know, I stand for these things, like it or not. Yesterday, a member of the Republican Party called me up and started interviewing me. He wanted to know what I was all about. And that quickly turned into something where I was supposed to support the Republican platform. And I'm not really sure what the Republican platform is, but it's probably something that's conservative, which, you know, I'm not libertarian, so I'm sure I oppose quite a bit of that. But, you know, I really resent, you know, people that fall in line. They say they believe in something which they really don't, maybe because they've had these donor contributions, you know. I hate bought politicians. I really hate them.
Did you want to go on that? Or?
Sure, I'll chime in here on both of these questions. You know, it costs $100 to be in this race and be on this side of the microphone. You know, our ballots could be flooded with people with $100 ideas, and the reason that it isn't is because this is really tough work. You know, I've been working around the clock. I can't tell you how much I've worked on you know, being a viable politician. As a candidate, I don't know. You know, it's hard to be a candidate. I'm not very social. You know, but you know, I'm training to do the actual job, and you know, I agree with Gary here. I have a libertarian background too, and you know, I'm not about to be bought. If someone sides with me and we agree on something, well, then you know, that's what it is. But I try to be, you know, right on with my thinking, and I'm constantly working on what I should be saying.
Can I add one more? Just a thing of that, you know, that when you run for office, and Rachel brought up about paying $100 to be on the ballot. Some states, you know, it costs a lot more than that. You go to Washington and you pay several $1,000s to be on the ballot. Or, you know, in Oregon, if you're not part of the Democratic or Republican Party, then you have to get 23,000 signatures to run for this position. So anybody that doesn't subscribe to the platforms or has their own kind of genuine ideas, and they're not able to just go raise a whole bunch of money from super PACs or corporations, you've got to get 23,000 signatures, which is nearly impossible for anybody to run as anything that's not part of that particular foundational structure of the two parties, you know, right? Like, so that's a problem we have to solve, and we've got to make it so that anybody can run for Congress instead of trying to make it so only the wealthy few can run for Congress.
So I agree with what a lot of these folks said, especially what Rachel said, that this is a job application. And I want to leave you with two things to think about. One of them is character, right? So we have people in this race who are not here. Of course, they can't defend themselves, they're not here, but a lot of their endorsements come from elected officials, which are great, but are they on the ground doing the work, right? Or they come from people like Stacey Abrams, who I love, and Barbara Lee, who's in California, who I love, but they don't live and work in our community. The endorsements that I have are people who have seen me every day. So the organizer of the Pride Parade and the executive director of the Black Chamber and food startups for women, people who every single day see me on the ground doing the work. So there's a character component, right? The other thing is the career and the career choices. One thing we're not talking about, Sushila, candidate, is not here. Sushila's a great public servant. But we're not talking about that she was a corporate litigator and made a lot of money. She also worked for corporate Adidas, and she also worked for Goldman Sachs. And so I have dedicated my life to nonprofit work, public interest work, community business law. And so we're both attorneys, we're both smart, and we're both progressive. Everyone's progressive, except for, well, you're progressive. But the question though is, who can do the job? Who can get on the ground and work with people of all types of organizations, and who can be a deal maker in Congress and negotiate? Who can survive the halls of DC, and who is a proven collaborator with people of every type? And so when we think about those things, yes, money in politics is important. But what happens is if we don't actually look at the people behind the money, or we don't actually ask questions about the character or the career of that person, then we're missing out on understanding who that person is.
Thank you, candidates. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who showed up tonight. Thank you so much to our amazing candidates for participating. Round of applause. We really appreciate it. And I think it's just amazing for people to connect with, politicians and candidates, and to see what it's really like and to hear from you in person directly. So thank you again. And we'd also like to thank the organizations who donated to the raffle today. Those were Wonderwood Springs, Columbia Riverkeeper, and 350 PDX. And then just as a last note, Charisse from 350 PDX is reaching out to the missing candidates who couldn't make it today. Thank you, everyone.
And especially a huge, huge, huge thank you to our two amazing moderators, Candace and Deshaun. Candace Jimenez, Deshaun Berry. So thank you, you too. Yep. Thank you everyone for participating, and on Zoom as well. If you couldn't make it in person. So have a safe trip home, and appreciate you all.
Hello, Dr. Dexter. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my name is Charisse Bach, and I'm the Climate Policy Manager at 350 PDX. And I appreciate you taking the time, since you ended up with a conflict when we did the candidate forum a little bit ago, and appreciate you being willing to still be willing to answer these questions that are crucial for making sure that we can hear from all the candidates about their perspectives on environmental and climate justice. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, so I'll have you start off by just introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit about you and who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Charisse and 350 and everyone for having me. I'm Maxine Dexter. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a mother, a physician, and a state representative, proud to serve the people of Portland. I'm a pulmonary and critical care physician and have spent over 2 decades as a physician and over 15 years taking care of patients in mostly CD3. I'm diligent about reviewing the science, looking at data, finding solutions that are data-driven, and making sure that we're doing the work that we need to do to improve people's lives. Caring for people is my reason for being. It's what I've been wanting to do since I was in 5th grade. And finding solutions to problems isn't just about the healthcare that I deliver. It's much more about the environment and the way that we are impacted by the climate and our air quality, water, all kinds of things that are intersectional. I see firsthand how many Oregonians are struggling to live healthy lives because of bad policy. And that prompted me to run for office in 2019 is when I started running for the House seat. And once again, running for Congress, because most of these issues have to be dealt with on a nationwide level, whether it's the Clean Air Act or clean water policies or fossil fuel drilling. we can solve these problems if we have experts in the room, people who know the science, who understand the impacts of current policy and actually listen to impacted communities, bringing them to the table to make sure that they're at the center of the new positions that we take and make. And that's why I'm running for Congress and really hope to earn your support.
Thank you. Appreciate that background. The next question is that communities on the front line of climate change in District 3 are vulnerable to environmental impacts, and these issues vary across identities. So who do you consider frontline communities, and how do you plan to support and hold yourself accountable to their needs?
Yeah, thank you. So who do I consider the frontline communities? There's a tremendous number. Obviously, there are the BIPOC communities, the most economically disadvantaged communities who are along our highway corridors, our rail line corridors near our ports and distribution centers, our immigrant communities, our LGBTQ2IA plus communities, those who are most marginalized from a social or an economic level are the frontline communities. And unfortunately, policies in Oregon as well as nationwide have continued to perpetuate inequitable health and social impacts on these communities, whether it's dividing Albina to put the I-5 corridor in it, or putting the most affordable housing along those corridors or near poor air quality and water areas or in areas without tree cover. The only way I know how to engage with communities or to serve communities is to engage with them. It's what I do with patients. You have to talk to the patient to understand what is the approach that works for them. I can't imagine not having communities that are impacted at the table when we're trying to make solutions in their best interest. We have to bring them to the table. That means language interpretation, childcare, food, transportation. We can't say you're welcome, but not create opportunities for people to be engaged. So as a congressional leader, I'll have open forums where people are. You know, if it's farm worker community issues, I'm going to go to the community-based living and in farm worker communities. If it's about the impacts of heat and smoke on outdoor workers, LEUNA and other labor unions are where I'm going to go. I believe that I am absolutely accountable to people and making sure that they're at the center of the things that I say I'm doing for them. If they haven't given me that input, then I'm not actually serving them.
Thank you. Appreciate that. The next question is, how do you plan to support local, national, and global green economies that provide employment opportunities for residents and work to eliminate inequitable working conditions, such as those faced by migrant seafarers that dock at the harbor and are unable to access basic services?
Yeah, again, making sure that we connect with these communities candidly, frequently, on a predictable schedule, knowing that you will have the opportunity to give input, fosters the opportunity to create input that you want to be heard. So making sure that communities know that I'm coming back and when. I've done this before with the farm worker community in Hood River and other parts of our state when I was trying to develop the farm worker housing investments. I went to Piccoon, I went to farms, I talked to farmers, but also the impacted farm workers on those farms to understand what it was. It's not just about upgrading the housing, it was wanting community-based housing. And that really changed the bill that we passed, making sure that those investments were for community-based housing. It would be the same for, you know, the wayfarer or seafarer, migrant seafarers and others that there's absolutely no reason that folks shouldn't be able to access support services and others. And if there's a question about getting back onto the ships or immigration status, we need to have clarity around that and have clear expectations for that. The relationships I build are based on dialogue and trust. And so you can't expect that without having conversations and engaged opportunities for problem solving. So when we're talking about global green economies, one example is House Bill 4080, which is a bill that we passed and worked really hard to pass this last session to build a blueprint or to put into statute a blueprint for how offshore wind projects must engage with community, with environmental impacts, with with environmental groups, as well as the fisheries groups and the community itself, to make sure that they have the workforce developed and the impact or the positive impacts from the investments for their community, that it's not a net negative, but a net positive. I'm proud of that work, and Representative Graber really set a precedent for how we do that. And I think that we need to really follow that precedent as we transition into a green economy. We've got to bring people in the communities along and create capacity, not just wealth for certain investment groups.
Thank you. This next question is about the Portland Harbor Superfund site, which is one of many sites in this country that is yet to be cleaned up. Most of the Superfund sites have general contractors bringing crews from out of state with little incentive to build wealth and economic justice for Superfund affected communities. How can you ensure that diverse regional contractors and a workforce made up of people of color, formerly and currently unhoused people, women and youth, etc., are provided safe, quality jobs and future career pathways to work on related projects?
Yeah, this is such an important issue. The Portland Harbor Superfund site was one of the first long-term issues that I dug into as a state representative. It's the largest Superfund site in the country. It is far too delayed in being cleaned up, and really the contracting around who's going to pay for that has been the hiccup and the hang up, I should say, and that needs federal delegation leaning in and really elevating with leadership on this. So that first has to happen before any of the next steps that you're asking about can be engaged. Again, the House Bill 4080 blueprint idea is exactly the right way. It also creates capacity and work for people in community, which is what this must do. I love that you have previously houseless people, women contractors, people of color. We need to disproportionately create apprenticeships for those marginalized economically and socially communities and build generational wealth with good union jobs, retirement benefits, the things that come with those investments. So that is top of mind for any of these federal cleanup dollars. When there's federal dollars, there should be strict protections for apprenticeships and capacity building, again, locally, not to have another group who gets paid under contract to come in and clean it up and then go away. We need to build that expertise here at home. In Congress, the Superfund site itself is absolutely going to be a top priority. The Superfund site and then the Willamette River upstream is also a major concern. Closer to the airport and in other areas, we have a lot of issues. So I know that Senator Merkley has been working on this. Congresswoman Bonamici has had interest in this, making sure that I align with my colleagues and elevating this. And as a physician, again, I understand the impacts of PFAS and those chemicals that are seeping into our groundwater. I can speak to this in a different way than I think some folks can, and the long-term impacts of leaving chemicals in our ecosystem. It's not just direct on people, it's obviously concentrating up the food chain and having dramatic impacts across our region.
Yeah, thank you. These next few questions were kind of lightning round questions where we gave the other candidates about a minute to answer. So we'll try to hold you to that as well.
Okay.
So the critical energy infrastructure hub in the Portland Harbor stores 90% of the state's fossil fuels. When the Cascadia earthquake occurs, which could happen anytime in our lifetimes, it could cause a far greater catastrophe than the BP oil spill. In what ways will you address disaster preparedness and prevention through federal level policies? And in what ways will these policies relate to the needs of vulnerable communities?
Yeah, so the critical energy infrastructure hub currently is in my district. And so I've been very engaged with them since I was elected. We must seismically upgrade the hub and make sure that any fossil fuel storage tanks or any hazardous material storage tanks have codes that are federally mandated with federal investments to help upgrade those tanks. Some of these infrastructures are so old and the companies are so narrowly margined that they can't do that investment. It's in the public's interest. We need to make sure that there's help for that. We have to secure funding to decentralize the critical energy infrastructure hub. It is absolutely insane that 90% of our fossil fuel dependence is coming through this area. When there is an earthquake, it's going to undermine our ability to clean it up. We won't have fossil fuels to run the machines that are going to clean it up. We won't be able to get fire trucks and boats to us. We must diversify that. And then long term, we have to focus on making the hub obsolete. I mean, that's the biggest issue. We need to divorce ourselves from fossil fuels. And when we do that, this will no longer be the catastrophe waiting to happen that it is.
Thank you. That's a lot to put into 1 minute, so great job. Recently, small modular nuclear reactors have been touted as a climate solution. Here in Oregon, a company called NewScale Power has been a benefactor of more than $1 billion of federal money. However, as of now, they've been unable to begin projects due to supposedly unforeseen cost increases. What is your stance on nuclear power, and will you work to slow or stop the flow of federal subsidies for nuclear power research and development in Congress?
Yeah, this is one that I really am looking to the scientific community in a lot of ways. It's an area of learning for me. I grew up in Washington, driving by the Whoops site, absolutely saw huge investments that never came to pass. And, also Hanford, very clearly understand the impacts of nuclear exposure. So nuclear energy, though, is being used safely in other parts of the world. And my concern is that we don't regulate things well enough when we don't upkeep things to make sure the infrastructure remains safe. So it may start, but may not be maintained. So those are the questions in my mind. If we find that there are safe ways to invest in nuclear, and there are many places that would say not only is that true, but that it's necessary for us to become divorced from fossil fuel dependence. I need to understand the scientific basis for these arguments and understand the safety requirements. And then we need to statutorily, if we decide to go down that route, which I'm not necessarily committing to, but I am open to it. We must make sure that there is sufficient regulation and maintenance so that that infrastructure is not putting us at risk as it has in other areas. And, we've all thinking about them, but the problem was the loss of maintenance for that infrastructure, not necessarily the infrastructure of itself with that. And I realized I was over a minute, so I stopped, sorry.
Thank you, appreciate it. The concept of a just transition for workers and frontline communities as we move away from fossil fuels to renewable energy has gained significant momentum in recent years. What does this term just transition mean to you?
Yeah, I worked with the Oregon Just Transition Alliance quite closely with our healthy homes and our land use laws. So I'm very clear that those groups, like the Just Transition Alliance, Just Transition advocacy groups, must be at the table when we're making those laws. Having them in the room made a huge difference. And so that's first and foremost. Again, nothing about you without you is what I am committed to. We must direct our resources first and foremost to the communities most impacted by climate change. So that's part of a just transition. As a pulmonary and critical care physician, decreasing particulate matter in the air is foundational for me. I think it is a non-controversial issue that particulate matter leads to disease. the people most exposed are the most marginalized. They need to be primarily focused on. The Healthy Homes investments was exactly that. I went to bat to make sure we fully funded that because we must adapt while we're mitigating climate change. And the 62 people in Multnomah County who lost their lives in the heat dome event was a policy failure. We need to make sure people have good HVAC systems and cooling systems. And unfortunately, affordable housing has the least. There's a disproportionate investments, again, to bring people along who don't have the capacity or the ability to do that themselves. Redlining, affordable housing, all of these things that we've done over the years, putting people in harm's way is on us. And we need to actively mitigate those impacts over time. In Congress, I'll fight for federal policies and initiatives with funds to continue to help nonprofits and local governments address the issues in their communities. Not every community is going to be like ours. Our policy here isn't going to be the same one in New York City. We need to make sure that it's, again, centering the community itself and having them at the table to find out what they need.
Thank you. And we had 3 questions that came in from the audience. And so you can go back to 2 minutes for each of these questions. So this next one is, the Inflation Reduction Act is one of the most significant pieces of climate legislation the US has passed in recent decades. What specific policies within the act do you support, oppose, or would you work to expand during your time in Congress?
Yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act made the single largest investment in climate in American history. It was phenomenal and extraordinary leadership. I fully support the investment. I understand that what we must do more is rebuild on crumbling renewable or crumbling or our crumbling electric grid system. We need more transmission. We need to upgrade that before we can bring renewable energy to the areas that need it. It's not helpful if it stays in one area. We've got to be able to transport it. And so those upgraded transmissions as part, or transmission infrastructure is part of that. We absolutely need to, again, divest from fossil fuels and have renewable energy generation. We've talked about different ways of that. I support the increased funding with focused investments in holding the wealthiest individuals and corporations accountable. I support the 15% minimum tax on large corporations, fully support the Medicare ability to negotiate prescription drug prices for some drugs. I would just say that it should be all critical drugs, if not all drugs, except for the newest ones coming onto the market, because frankly, I'm not sure that they have been fully vetted, but those that are, you know, needed in our community, we should be able to negotiate across the board on all of those. One important piece of the package that's going to become more relevant for us in Oregon is the $514 million investment to address the Colorado River Basin drought. As climate continues to change and worsen, the drought conditions in the Pacific Northwest are going to worsen, but also deeper south. We will have climate refugees moving to Oregon as water infrastructure and water is depleted. We have to invest in water infrastructure upgrades, and I would expand to bring funding home so that we can make those investments to protect our tribal, communicable, and agricultural access to water and make sure that that infrastructure is sound. I have no doubt that we are going to have many more people moving to this area and will be dependent on that infrastructure.
Thank you. And how will you support creating pathways for young people to enter politics?
Yeah, this has been something that has been such a privilege to do since I've been in office, from the time that my teenagers and other friends were middle school to high school knocking doors in 2019 to now. We had a robust internship program. I did proactive outreach to the local high schools in my district to make sure that we had opportunities for people who wouldn't otherwise think about internships. I've never had an unpaid internship. We always will pay at least $15 an hour, and I think it should be more than that. We need to make sure that people think of themselves as policy crafters and leaders, not just being subjected to policies, but actually driving the policies. And until we build a bench of diverse, engaged political thinkers, we are going to continue to do more of the same. We have to diversify the people at the table and give them the leadership skills to show up confident and effective, and make sure that they have people like me, white woman, who can lift them up. This is not a white savior issue. It is making space and opening that door for the people to come behind. And when you are in elected office, it is incumbent upon you to make sure that you invest in your community. The way to do that is making sure that we bring those youth to the table. It's not just campaigning for me, it's actually building opportunities for them. I can't tell you how many letters for college recommendations I've written, and very excited how many folks have gotten into the schools of their choice. This is something I take very seriously. I'm first in my family to go to college. I'm only here because the University of Washington had a more progressive entry requirement and was willing to take someone like me who didn't have all the opportunities that other people did. If people don't make those proactive choices to make room for others, we will continue to have elitists writing policies. And I think having someone who comes from a working family like me at the table helps. But I still have my white, privilege. We need more people who don't have any of that, who can really speak truth to power and be in power.
Thanks. And last question from the audience. Congress seems to be, to many outsiders, a cesspool of corruption and is constantly undermining the public interest in favor of wealthy patrons. How will you avoid falling prey to this bipartisan syndrome?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm falling prey to the bipartisan syndrome. So I entered politics not for fortune, fame, or power. It's because I want to serve, and I see people struggling, and I understand differently when I see patients, the impact of policies on them. A lot of political leaders never leave their small community network. I see every day people across every social and economic and belief system, and that changes how you think about social policy. It's really hard to deny how poorly it's serving people when you see it every day and their health impacted by it. So I find it really unlikely that this is going to be something that I'm suddenly going to fall into. I haven't in 20 years as a physician, with plenty of opportunity to become more conservative, I guess. I come from a very conservative household. I'm used to tough conversations. I have them every day with patients. The way I show up is giving people the benefit of the doubt, assuming good intent, and then trusting but verifying. I will not be someone who takes someone's word and continues to be duped by them. They get to be challenged once and then not trusted until they regain that trust. And I think that is what we as lawmakers need to think about too. When we make policy choices and we don't have the outcome that we anticipated, we need to go back to those impacted communities and take accountability and show how we're going to do better. So I think that, the public interest issues and the lobby issues, this is top of mind right now. We need campaign finance reform. We need a lot of things. And I am not there because I'm trying to play a game and win. I'm there sincerely to help people. And if that's not possible as a political leader, I don't know where it is. We can have the most impact if we really center people, and that's what I'm committed to.
Thank you. That's all of the questions. Do you want to do a brief wrap up of, encapsulate your race and why you're running?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think the core issues here are that we're not very different as far as most of the candidates for this seat. we have pretty aligned values. We're all progressive. When you ask us about any of these issues, I think we're probably aligned in a lot of ways. I think the difference again is that I'm a scientist. I understand data. I understand when people aren't giving complete data or when they're basing recommendations on bad data. We see it all the time with pharmaceutical industries and trying to get doctors to use drugs that don't actually have the benefits, but they make people a lot of money. It is exactly the same issue when you're talking about investments in renewable energy or, the best new technologies. I am able to not just read the data, but ask questions and make sure I know who to go to for answers. I'm also humble. I don't pretend to know all the answers. I'm not afraid to say when I don't know. And I think that's really an important quality in somebody who can't possibly know everything about all the things we're going to be asked to vote on. I've seen far too many times in my time in the legislature, people are willing to assume that their opinion is the right one without questioning it. That is not me. That is how you hurt people as a physician. It's a professional discipline that I would not be able to abide or engage in. And then the other thing that I've already spoken to is I see people every day in my office across all social and economic spectra in this district, from this district. I understand the issues people are grappling with, and those are the reasons I'm running for office. I love my job as a physician. I'm good at being a physician, but I cannot sit back and watch as my kids fear for their climate future and their economic future, and all children. I don't know a young person who isn't concerned about this. I don't want to be like what my dad has done, is said, I'm not going to be here for it. I'm just going to sit back and let others take care of it. I've got to show my kids and others that we need to take action if we're going to make the world better. We can't be passive. This is a time for as many people as possible to lean in, and I'm offering myself up for the voters, and I hope that they'll support me. I'm certainly in this for the authentic reason of caring for this district and people, and I hope to earn their support.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions and for your service to Oregon already. So I appreciate this window into your thoughts and how you would serve Oregon in Congress.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I really appreciate you taking time and being so flexible around this.
Hello, and thank you, Commissioner Jayapal, for being willing to meet with us and answer our questions that we asked the other candidates at the Environmental Justice Candidate Forum recently at University of Portland. So I understand you had an unavoidable conflict and were able to be there, so it's great that you were able to take this time. My name is Sharice Bach, and I'm the Climate Policy Manager at 350 PDX, which was one of the sponsors of that event, and I'll be just asking you these questions, and we appreciate hearing your thoughts. So the first questions are if we could just get you to introduce yourself a little bit and what motivates you to run for the 3rd congressional district seat.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for being flexible and giving me this chance to speak to your members. Hi, everyone. I am Sushila Jayapal, running for Oregon's 3rd congressional district. I am a 30-year resident of this district, brought up my children here. They graduated from Grant High School, but I'm originally from India, grew up in India, also in Indonesia, came to the US when I was 16 to go to college. My parents really, really believed that this was the place where we, my sister and I, could be independent as women. To them, the American promise meant something. I think a lot of folks are cynical about it, but it really meant something to them. So I have forever been grateful for the opportunity they provided me by sending us here. They did not have a lot of money. They have grown old alone in India at this point. So very grateful, very mindful of wanting to pay that sacrifice forward, and also incredibly mindful of the number of people who don't have those opportunities and who should and who deserve them. That is ultimately what led me into politics. I've had a long career. I was a lawyer in private practice. My last legal job was at Adidas America. where one of the things I'm most proud of was creating the first set of labor standards for our overseas factories. I left Adidas because ultimately I did not find the work in the private sector fulfilling and really wanted to pivot towards community work. Served on a lot of nonprofit boards, including our local Planned Parenthood, and then decided in 2017 to run for the county commission. And I did that because as I looked around and saw what people in Portland were experiencing, growing income inequality, inability to survive here, even in good economic times, I decided that the county, which is our social safety net, would be the place where I could really have the most impact on those issues. Served during an incredibly difficult time through the pandemic. Very proud of the work that the county did during the pandemic. I think we've forgotten that actually we experienced a relatively low mortality rate, relatively low infection rates, and then of course have been working on the really huge issues around homelessness and addiction and mental health and so many other things that are affecting our community. And again, it's sort of a peeling of the onion process. What I have realized is so many of those issues have been in the making for decades and have their roots in federal and state disinvestment or neglect, and that the solutions at scale sit at the federal level. So on top of that, the fact that these local issues, I think, have to have federal leadership. We also have the things that are happening at the federal level, the attack on our democracy, the attack on our civil rights. It is a very pivotal moment. Attack on Social Security and Medicare, the things that everyday Americans count on in order to be able to survive. So all of those reasons are what led me to run for Congress. I think this is a pivotal moment in time. It's a moment in time when the role of a congressperson is different than it was 28 years ago when Congressman Blumenauer first went to Congress. It is absolutely about legislating, something that I believe my legal experience and my county experience amply qualifies me for. It's also a moment for advocacy, for advocates, for people who can really articulate a vision and stand up behind that vision.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that introduction. We have a couple of minutes for each of these next few questions related to climate and environmental justice. So first of all, communities on the front line of climate change in District 3 are vulnerable to environmental impacts, and these issues vary across identities. Who do you consider frontline communities, and how do you plan to support and hold yourself accountable to their needs?
Yeah, this relates so much to my areas of focus, which are shared prosperity, addressing climate change, and democracy and civil rights. And they're all interconnected, and we can't do one without the others. And the relationship here is about when we're addressing climate change, using that as an opportunity to also create shared prosperity and to provide resilience to those frontline communities. Who do I consider frontline communities? The communities that have been intentionally left out and left behind of our economic system. And that has meant both that they are economically vulnerable and that they are vulnerable to climate change. So it means both that they have not had access to good jobs and that they often live in places that are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. I think those are communities of color, Black and brown communities. They are immigrant and refugee communities. And, when we look at the neighborhoods, for example, that have been affected by our heat dome, the ice that we had, I think we see that absolutely play out. So those are who I view as our frontline communities. Again, the communities who have been intentionally, by policy, left out of our systems. And how would I stay accountable to them? If you go on my website and look at my endorsement page, you will see a list of more than 100 endorsements from local District 3 community leaders who work on the front lines with those frontline communities, Black community, brown community, Native community, LGBTQ community. Those are the people that I have relationships with, and they will hold me accountable, and I will hold myself accountable to those folks and work with them. There's no way to do the work at Congress or at the county or at the state legislature, really, without those relationships being not just bringing folks to the table, but making sure that frontline communities are running the table. That's what needs to happen. Frontline communities are experts in their own lives, and they need to be running and really shaping and informing our policies.
Thanks so much. How do you plan to support local, national, and global green economies that provide employment opportunities for residents and work to eliminate inequitable working conditions, such as those faced by migrant seafarers that dock at the harbor and are unable to access basic services?
Thank you for that question. It is the specific policy issue around seafarers isn't one that I know a lot about. But in general, again, I think all of these things are connected. We can't silo work that we do on climate change from work that we do on working conditions and economic conditions. We can't silo them from work we do on trade policy or foreign policy, right? These things are all connected, and we have to be able to do them all at the same time. So, I think my answer is very similar to a couple of my last answers, which is, by connecting those dots and embedding labor protections in any climate change work that we do. And I'll use the Inflation Reduction Act as an example. It isn't just a climate change bill, it's a labor bill because it requires the payment of prevailing wage in order to get some of the incentives. So that's how we do it, by wrapping every piece of these issues into the legislation and the policy making, and making sure that we're not just saying, here's a green energy project, it doesn't matter who works on it. Of course it matters. We need local hire provisions, we need project labor agreements, we need all of the things that are going to make sure that those projects are delivered with the absolute best possible economic outcomes for frontline communities.
Thank you. And that kind of goes into the next question that asks you a little bit more specifics in a similar direction. The Portland Harbor Superfund site is one of many sites in this country that is yet to be cleaned up. Most of the Superfund sites have general contractors bringing crews from out of state with little incentive to build wealth and economic justice for Superfund affected communities. How can you ensure that diverse regional contractors and a workforce made up of people of color, formerly and currently unhoused people, women and youth, et cetera, are provided safe, quality jobs and future career pathways to work on related projects?
Yeah, it is a sort of a second iteration of what we talked about earlier. One of the things that I really championed at Multnomah County was project labor agreements on our big projects. And I think the county was a leader in this respect. Selwood Bridge, McCoy Health Building, any number of very, very large projects where our project labor agreements had, we tracked and had goals for not only local hire, but also, and not only, a minority and women hire, apprenticeship hire, just a whole series of goals that we really held folks accountable to. I was the only commissioner who staffed the committee that provided oversight to that. My chief of staff actually sat on that committee. And I think that's the approach we need to take on something like having, these contractors coming in and bringing folks from out of state. We absolutely have to wrap in those local hire requirements, apprenticeship workforce requirements. And again, I think that that's work that the Biden administration has undertaken. It just needs to be expanded to, frankly, everywhere where we're spending public tax dollars should have those kinds of project labor agreements, community benefit agreements attached to them.
Great, thank you. And these next few questions were a little bit of a lightning round where we spent about a minute for each candidate on these, so we'll kind of ask you to do similarly. The critical energy infrastructure hub in Portland Harbor stores 90% of the state's fossil fuels. When the Cascadia earthquake occurs, which could happen anytime now in our lifetimes, it could cause a far greater catastrophe than the BP oil spill. In what ways will you address disaster preparedness and prevention through federal level policies? And in what ways will these policies relate to the needs of vulnerable communities?
I think many of your members have worked on this for a long time, and I was pleased to work with them on it. I co-commissioned the report that clearly showed us how disastrous this Cascadia effect will be, that led to legislation at the state level to require the owners of those tanks to come up with mitigation plans and then hopefully eventually to execute those plans. So I think we need to continue that work at the federal level. I don't know what the specific policy levers are at the federal level, but I think it's the same concepts, right? It's holding owners of this kind of infrastructure accountable, and making them, compelling them to have mitigation plans is one way to do that. I am very interested in looking into oil trains. That I know that's a little bit separate from the CEI hub issue, but I think there's some related policy possibilities with the oil trains. And again, we can't silo these issues. They are all related. So given that this is a lightning round, I assume I'm up with my 1 minute. But we'll look for all of those, and we'll look forward to your members' ideas. They've already sent. I've received emails from folks about federal policy changes that could be made. I'll look forward to continuing that conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's a lot to fit into 1 minute, so I appreciate that. Recently, small modular nuclear reactors have been touted as a climate solution. Here in Oregon, a company called NuScale Power has been a benefactor of more than $1 billion of federal money. However, as of now, they've been unable to begin projects due to supposedly unforeseen cost increases. What is your stance on nuclear power, and will you work to slow or stop the flow of federal subsidies for nuclear power research and development in Congress?
Yeah, we all know the very difficult and dangerous history of nuclear power, and I think we've got to keep that top of mind. I do understand that folks say it's there's different technology, there are technological solutions, but my view is that we should, we've got existing nuclear infrastructure. We need to maintain that and make that as safe as possible. But that I do not see that building more nuclear power or nuclear powered projects like this is the path forward. I don't think it's necessary. We have enough clean energy options that we can move forward with those, and not continue a path on something that has proven very dangerous in the past. So that's my stance on nuclear power. I think that a general comment I'll make on our approach to climate change, there are many areas in which we are reaching for technological solutions that are a long way away, that are going to be very expensive when we have other alternatives available, like simply using wind and solar, dealing with other greenhouse gas emission sources like methane, like deforestation, addressing our industrial and agricultural sectors. So there are a lot of other strategies that we can be pursuing to address greenhouse gases before we go back to something that has proven very problematic in the past.
Yeah, thank you. One more in this section, the concept of a just transition for workers and frontline communities as we move away from fossil fuels to renewable energy has gained significant momentum in recent years. What does this term just transition mean to you?
I love this question, in part because I use it to explain what I mean when I say the role of a congressperson has changed in the last 28 years. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came into Congress talking about the Green New Deal, people dismissed her. Leadership dismissed her. Too far away, too visionary, too. Well, she didn't necessarily pass that bill, but the essential concept of just transition has become a common talking point and has been built into the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill. Ideas that came out of that are in implementation. So that's what I mean when I say we need progressive leaders who are going to articulate a vision and then move us towards that vision. What does it mean to me? Many of the things that we've talked about. It means that we recognize that our prior economic system, our fossil fuel-based system, has been unjust to specific communities, Black communities, brown communities, Native communities in particular. And that as we make this transition, we have to repair past harms. In essence, it's reparation, by making sure that the opportunities of this transition go first to those communities that have been harmed by our fossil fuel economy. And also that we're providing resilience because they're going to continue to be hit by the impacts of climate change. So a just transition is achieving all of those things at one time. And again, a just transition cannot be achieved without those frontline communities, not just with a seat at the table, but running the table.
Thank you. And again, I think your answer kind of starts going in the direction of this next question. These next three questions came from the audience. So this one is about the Inflation Reduction Act, stating that the Inflation Reduction Act is one of the most significant pieces of climate legislation the US has passed in recent decades. What specific policies within the act do you support, oppose, or would you work to expand during your time in Congress?
Yeah, so, again, I think I've talked about a few of these before. What I most support is the fact that it provides resources, obviously for many things, for many green energy infrastructure projects, and that it does that while using the opportunity to shore up protections for workers and wages for workers and organized labor. I haven't mentioned this before. I think organized labor is key to a just transition. I think organized labor is key to that shared prosperity goal that I mentioned earlier on. And so that's one of the pieces of the legislation that, again, things like providing incentives for contractors that pay a prevailing wage. I also really support and appreciate the fact that it makes room for funding for government agencies as well as companies, and for nonprofit organizations as well, that the tax credit incentives are structured in such a way that governments and nonprofits can take advantage of them. I think often we do so much of our funding and resource providing through tax credits, and that eliminates whole communities, whole sectors of our base. So, and it makes things really complicated. So those are two of the things that I support. I can't think of specific things I oppose. I'm sure they exist, but I have not analyzed the act at that level. So, more focus on what I support and would continue to support.
Great, thank you. And how will you support creating pathways for young people to enter politics?
Love that. I actually would start early. I think that the place to start is with civics education. I think we've lost that and I think we can start at the earliest, young folks, kindergarten, second, third grade, to start to embed ideas about civic education, understanding of our government, the structure of our government, and then build on that as people, as young people, become teenagers and so forth, get to high school. So I think we need to start civics education a lot earlier. And then in terms of specific pathways, I have, I used my very small office at the county commission to provide a number of internships. We had interns all year round and during the summer. I think that, and they were always paid. Paid internships in congressional offices are a great way to get a sense of what's happening. I would love to support organizations that also train people to work on campaigns. I think that's a real gap, and especially a gap for candidates of color and for people of color who are interested in that kind of work. So would love to figure out how to support those efforts. And, I see the role of a congressperson as being engaging in local politics and getting engaged in really supporting progressive candidates, whatever that looks like. Often it's endorsements, and sort of sharing, participating in forums and things like that. So very much look forward to doing all of those things.
Thank you. And this last audience question is, Congress seems to be, to many outsiders, a cesspool of corruption and is constantly undermining the public interest in favor of wealthy patrons. How will you avoid falling prey to this bipartisan syndrome?
Yeah. I mentioned that democracy was one of my, top line objectives. And if I have to choose one category that I believe is most important to restoring a democracy, it is addressing the role of money in politics. Those who've been following this race know that this is a very topical issue in my race. There are at this point $3.3 million that have come in from very wealthy outside donors. Donors who've put down, one has put down $500,000 to support one of my opponents. Another has put down $900,000 to run attack ads against me. And this is several layers of problematic. It's problematic because outside interests are buying this election. It's problematic because very wealthy interests are buying this election. It's problematic because many of the donors who are either opposing or supporting my opponent are Republicans who are simultaneously funding Republican candidates around the country. So we've got to address the role of money in politics. You know, I'm often asked, how is it that most Americans support gun control and yet we can't get it passed? Or name any other, climate change policies and yet we seem stuck. Money in politics. There are things we can do. You know, some of them are hard. Constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, which allowed corporate money into politics, will be hard, but I think we need to work on that. We need to work on hard things. I am not taking any corporate PAC donations. I think we need politicians who will walk the talk. It's not enough to profess the values. You have to act on them. So Citizens United, I think we should end independent expenditures and campaigns. They're unaccountable. If we are going to continue to allow them, we should enforce the transparency laws we do have and create new ones so voters know exactly who is supporting or opposing a candidate, because that's one of the things that people take into account when they make their decisions at the ballot box. So transparency, independent expenditures. I think that all contributions should be capped. There is no reason one millionaire or billionaire should be able to put $500,000 or $900,000 into a race to elect the candidate of their choice, whatever their reason. So there are a number of things I think we can do. And I have already walked my talk, and I will continue to walk my talk. And I want to say that there are many, progressives in Congress today who are doing that. So I understand why people feel cynical and feel that the corruption is bipartisan, but it's not. There are folks in Congress today who don't take corporate PAC money, don't take Republican money, and I will continue. I will continue to walk my talk.
Thank you. Appreciate you answering all of our questions. And so I'll just give you a minute or two, however long you want to take, I guess, to wrap up and share anything else about your campaign that you would like to share.
Yeah, thank you. Well, less than 2 weeks to go. So we are just working hard. I am the true progressive in this race, and I'm going to define what I mean by true progressive. It means both the policies that we want to advance, and there's been a lot of talk about how the three leading contenders in the race have the same policy objectives. That's actually not quite true. There are several policies in which I believe I am farther ahead than my opponents. But the other thing is that it is about the policies. It's also about how we are able to implement those policies and how we advocate for them and how, again, we stand up for our beliefs with our actions as well. I have been out front on every one of my sort of main priorities. On abortion, I have been out front about my experience because I think that's a way to lead, is to share that experience and to normalize it. Climate change, I'm endorsed by all of the environmental and climate organizations in this race. And that's because, again, while we may not differ on details of policy, I have proven myself to lead in that arena. Healthcare, just out front on Medicare for all. And then the other piece is having that coalition. You can't be a progressive leader without having a community coalition that you have relationships with, that you are taking with you to Congress. And my list of 100 endorsements, again, is community leaders who've worked with me over my 30 years in this district, who know my leadership, who know I deliver. And that's the coalition that I can continue to build on to move progressive policies. So I ask for your members' vote as the progressive candidate in this race.
Thank you so much again. Really appreciate you taking the time to share with us. And we appreciate the service that you've already done to Oregon and that you're continuing to do.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Therese. Appreciate it. Take care.